Most of us know someone who has quietly stepped back from the noise. They mute the news cycle, log off from the daily political arguments, and deliberately build a smaller life entirely around the people who matter to them. Looking at a chaotic world and deciding to lock the door feels incredibly tempting, but it forces a difficult question. Is withdrawing to focus on a private, happy life the most rational thing a person can do right now? Or is it simply a luxury that only works if someone else stays outside to fight the fires? This tension between retreating from society and trying to fix it feels highly specific to our modern exhaustion. In reality, it is a 2,300-year-old philosophical argument about how to survive the collapse of an empire. By the year 306 BCE, Alexander the Great's massive empire had fractured. The Greek city-states lost their fierce independence, and ordinary citizens suddenly found themselves subject to massive, unstable kingdoms ruled by distant kings they would never meet. The Stoic philosophers looked at this wreckage and concluded that a wise person still had a strict duty to engage. They argued that only virtue matters, meaning you have to participate in public life and endure the chaos, regardless of the outcome. A philosopher named Epicurus observed the exact same political instability and drew the exact opposite conclusion. He decided that political ambition, public life, and the pursuit of influence are endless sources of anxiety that should be avoided entirely. Epicurus bought a plot of land on the outskirts of Athens and built a community known simply as the Garden. He invited his friends, and eventually strangers, to live there. In a stark departure from Athenian norms, women studied alongside men, and enslaved people debated alongside citizens. The community physically embodied the message carved into the stone above their gate. The inscription welcomed strangers with a radical promise. Inside those walls, the highest good a human could achieve was pleasure. When we hear the word Epicurean today, we usually think of extreme indulgence and luxury. But Epicurus drew a strict line between the temporary pleasure of satisfying a craving, which requires you to be in a state of pain or lacking first, and the deep pleasure of having no unmet needs at all. He called this second, superior state ataraxia. Ataraxia is a philosophical term that describes a state of profound tranquility, a body entirely free from physical suffering, and a mind entirely free from fear. To Epicurus, this calm baseline was the highest possible good. Getting to that baseline requires examining what we actually want. This animated chart shows anxiety levels associated with different human pursuits. When you look at desires manufactured by society, things like fame, political influence, and excessive wealth, the bars scale upwards endlessly. Because these desires have no natural limit, they generate constant anxiety without ever delivering permanent satisfaction. But if you focus on natural desires, his version of the good life was an exercise in subtraction. Pleasure is found in ruthlessly reducing what you require to be happy.
Epicurus built his entire ethical system on a foundation of materialist physics. He argued that the universe consists exclusively of atoms and empty void. Consequently, the human soul simply dissolves at death. He acknowledged that gods might exist, but he reasoned they must be perfectly blessed beings. And because a perfect being cannot be vulnerable or disturbed, they take absolutely no interest in human affairs. His followers distilled these ideas into the tetrapharmakos, which translates to the four-part cure. It's a simple set of maxims to eliminate fear. Do not fear the gods, because they are indifferent. Do not fear death, because you won't be there to experience it. What is good is easy to get. What is painful is easy to endure. Epicurus tested that final claim about pain with his own body. At age 72, he died from kidney stones, enduring some of the sharpest agony known to medicine. On his final day, he wrote a letter stating that his extreme physical suffering was completely counterbalanced by the cheerfulness of his mind, which he drew from remembering a lifetime of philosophical conversations. He didn't face death with cold detachment. He faced it by leaning on decades of honest friendship and a life built closely around the people he loved. The tranquility of the garden didn't protect it from later authorities. For 15 centuries, Christian leaders actively suppressed Epicurean writings. They weren't threatened by pleasure. easily dismissed as indulgence. They were threatened by the materialist physics denying an immortal soul and divine providence. Without an afterlife, there was no mechanism for divine judgment or mandatory obedience to the Church. The rejection was absolute. When Dante wrote his Inferno, he placed the followers of Epicurus deep in the sixth circle of hell. They weren't punished for hedonism. They were condemned specifically for the heresy of claiming the soul dies with the body. In 1841, Karl Marx chose Epicurus for his doctoral dissertation, recovering a suppressed intellectual tradition prioritizing material reality over abstract idealism. The philosophy was deliberately buried because of a dangerous logical conclusion. If people do not fear divine punishment and they realize they don't need wealth or status to be happy, they become incredibly difficult for any political or religious authority to control. Yet, the ancient Stoics saw a glaring ethical hole in the garden that Epicurus never resolved. His community offered a peaceful refuge for the individuals inside it, but it completely failed to challenge the massive, unjust systems, like the institution of slavery, operating right outside its walls. Which brings us to the choice we face today.
If your needs are met, the conversation honest, and the people you love are beside you, do you still have an obligation to step outside and suffer the anxieties of a world you likely cannot reshape? Quietly pulling back from the noise to cultivate your own garden brings undeniable peace. The enduring question is whether that peace is a profound victory of human sanity or a quiet privilege built on the backs of those who stay outside to face the storm.